is that Leo? Yeah.
Hey, thanks for coming on.
What's up?
Excited to have you today. Looks
Yeah,
like we
thanks
got a
for
good
having me.
crowd, and so let's get started. So to introduce us and Jay. So we're Pangolin Exchange, one of the biggest dexes on Avalanche, and Jay is the VP of Marketing at AvaLabs, who builds and runs Avalanche. So how's everything been this week, Jay?
This week has been awesome, honestly. I think it really is coming off the excitement of Masari. I know I met you there, and I met a bunch of others probably listening on this call. It was really cool to put a face to name. I think as we're all just kind of staring at our screens for the last few years, and then one thing I was talking to the people I met and even the team at the AvaLab side was I forgot how awesome these events are, and I realized that's a lot of the events that happen on a day-to-day basis is exactly why I love working in this space. It's just so many cool people from all over the world coming up with really cool ideas, and I think the best moment beyond that is also when you're talking to someone, you're like, oh man, this person is way smarter than me. It's a little bit intimidating, and so I do love that feeling.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Masari Mainnet was a great event. Just meeting the AvaLabs team, meeting all the projects presenting there, and even meeting some of my own Pangolin team. That was really awesome, and I'm glad we can do things like that in person again. Really reinforced how strong the AvaLabs team is. Really strong team. Great to see that they're building our network. And so let's kind of just review the topics that we're going to cover today. So really want to learn more about your own journey, Jay. How you got here. Want to kind of cover Avalanche Rush, and then maybe get your thoughts on Pangolin and the DeFi landscape. How's that sound?
Yeah, sounds great. Let's do it.
Cool. So, Jay, why don't you tell us a bit about your own journey into DeFi, into crypto, how you got into your current role?
Yeah, the original kind of foray into crypto is probably like a lot of people who came in a little bit on the earlier side. It was exposure to Bitcoin. 2011 was approximately when I started to mess around with what I thought at the time was just simply magic internet money. I think some people might still think that about Bitcoin, but that was where just was interesting in that there was a community that was surrounding it. There were people using it. And it almost seemed like there were some real world use cases at the time, mostly with transactions. And so that was enough to pique my interest, but not enough to really dive in professionally, I would say. And in 2015, that was when Ethereum was coming into the fold, with Vitalik really starting to evangelize what it's like to really build applications on top of distributed ledgers and blockchain technology. And that's when it actually clicked a lot more for me because at heart, I'm a technologist, and all of the things that happen in the broad umbrella of technology it fascinates me, and I always love learning about those systems and how they work. And so, simply put, with Ethereum, I was looking at it and saying, well, what could be done here? I get what this is doing, but what else can this enable? And kind of the imagination ran wild. And that's really where I started to take things seriously a little bit more on the professional side. And meanwhile, on the sidelines, I was doing brand and marketing consulting for mostly Fortune 500 fintech, financial services, and some pharmaceutical brands, actually. And that's where I was like, how do I combine the two? Obviously, there are some overlap, but not necessarily complete overlap. And it was really following the signals of the agency I was at. And that's where I was like, hey, maybe I can find other like minded people in the agency and start a consultancy within this agency to service just crypto brands. And that's kind of what led to starting the agency, focused on brands like Circle and the Bitcoin Foundation. Those were a few that we touched on, and a bunch of other ICO projects. Some of them exist, some of them don't anymore. And that was kind of a fantastic learning experience to understand what could be done with this technology, both from the technical perspective and the marketing and community perspective. And then naturally, next was like, okay, well, I love this experience, but I want to focus in and actually really understand what it's like to be an operator, what it's like to work with engineers, product, and pretty much push the boundaries of what's capable with this technology and this space, and joined the company called Fluidity. That was an Ethereum focused company. We primarily did two things. One was security tokens, and the other one was a decentralized exchange called AirSwap. That is now a part of MetaMask. So that team got acquired by Consensus. As that acquisition went through, I decided to try new things, and that's where I joined AvaLabs, and have been VP of marketing since then, and have been really focused on two things. One was really to prep Avalanche for launch in September 2020, both on the fundraising side, ecosystem development, and then also just marketing and community development around the Avalanche brand. And then the second thing is what we've been focused on since launch, which is mostly with ecosystem development, and also with Avalanche platform marketing, and just making sure that all the stakeholders that could benefit from this technology have at least access to it, or understands how it could service as a solution for them.
That's awesome. No, that's a great journey, Jay. I appreciate you walking us through that. And I definitely call you an OG, as they say in the industry. You've been around for a while and have had so many experiences. That's really awesome to see. And so tell us a little bit about the VP of marketing role at AvaLabs. What does that mean? What are your role responsibilities there?
I would say the role is probably to scale the team, and make sure that we have the best and brightest talent to fill, I guess, the opportunities that we have within the marketing stack. So, for example, in the early days of AvaLabs, it was just a handful of people doing everything, including social, community, paid, brand engagements, and everything in between. But of course, that doesn't really work long term, especially as the scope continues to grow. And so now we have to identify people within the space, but also outside of the space, to encourage diversity, and actually more importantly than diverse thinking, I think. So if you have more types of people, more ways of thinking, then we're just going to have better outcomes. It's just something that is quite obvious at this point. And that's something that we've been focused on since day one, and still are focused on right now. As the team now is around, including community managers, it's around, the marketing and community functions, around 30 people, with about 10 core strategists on the marketing side. And then on the flip side, I would say it's also just driving strategy wherever possible. So whether that's leading marketing ops strategy, making sure that everyone is able to do their job at its fullest, and operate in the verticals they need to be operating. And then on the flip side, also have specific strengths in DeFi, for example. Also anything Web3, I would say, at least speaking on behalf of my skill set. And so a lot of the times, if you see like Avalanche Rush, for example, or maybe like a DApp deployment, or maybe ecosystem projects, a lot of the times I'm one of the strategists amongst others who help drive the marketing concept from ideation all the way to execution.
Wow, that's great. That's awesome to see that you've built the team into, I think you said 30 people. That's huge. And for your team and the entire AvaLabs team to take a brand new chain and turn it into like a top 15 blockchain in terms of like market cap and TVL, that is amazing. And I just want to hear maybe Justin's thoughts on success of Avalanche's marketing. Can you give us your opinion, Justin?
Yeah, I think it's been really fantastic to see it grow. As Jay mentioned, it's challenging. I'm not a marketer. It's definitely not one of the things I'm very good at. So it's always great watching people that are experts and professionals in their field excel. And you can really start seeing that with Jay. They've got a lot of attention to detail that I think a lot of people miss some of the intricacies and some of the finer details, but you can see it, as you watch it evolve over time about their different channels, how they approach it, how their messages on point, how it keeps to their brand strategy. Again, I'm not an expert, but it's something that I love watching so that I can try learn and become better.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, and it's especially impressive because I think the playbooks to make a DeFi, a crypto project, successful is definitely different than just a traditional tech company. I mean, do you have any commentary on that, Jay? Since you've worked in both worlds, like how is marketing in crypto different?
The main difference I always like to highlight is you can't just come in as a seasoned marketing exec and hope that it'll be the same playbook. It's just not. It hasn't really been proven, and maybe there are some diamonds. Just not. It hasn't really been proven, and maybe there are some diamonds in the rough out there who have been able to make it happen. But at the end of the day, something that I always tell new hires on our team is, let's get you onboarded. And what does that mean? Okay, so let's dive deep, start asking the right questions, or not even the right questions, but just ask any question, anything that comes to mind, because that might lead to other conversation topics. Let's get the core institutional knowledge down pat. So the path that most of us probably are familiar with, which is like Bitcoin, maybe Ethereum, if you're talking about smart contracts platforms, then really touch on what are the pain points and see then what the next generation of blockchains are trying to achieve, and so on and so forth as we continue to move forward. And then I think the last thing I always say is start using the products, whether that's on testnet or real money. We can figure out a way for you to use that product, because ultimately my best education has been using these products in and out, making those huge mistakes, but also doing very successful strategies, especially in the context of DeFi. So yesterday, I forgot who I was talking to, but actually a friend who I used to work with at my older agency, and she just got into crypto pretty heavily. But she was saying, "Oh, well, it was really annoying because no one told me that if you use DeFi and Ethereum, you shouldn't really be doing it unless you have like a, I don't know, like 5-figure check on chain. Otherwise, you're just going to eat your principal." And so she used like $1,000 and she totally drew down all of it, or almost all of it, in gas fees while trying to learn the platform. And obviously not a great first first experience for anybody, for what it's worth. And so again, that's kind of a silly story to highlight the point of saying, hey, chalk up those mistakes as part of your kind of DeFi tuition. I see that said all the time, and so it's not a huge deal that, it's obviously a lot of money, but it's not a huge deal that money is now sunk into miners. Instead, just take it as a learning opportunity and ask yourself, okay, well, what is it that caused this? And then even further, maybe, is like, what can be done to make sure that I never make the same mistake again? Is it something that improves the ecosystem within the ecosystem that you're playing in initially, or is it just looking at all their alternatives naturally, like in any kind of market research that you would do?
No, that's great insight, and I think you're absolutely right. It's just a different beast when it comes to promoting DeFi, getting users into crypto. And we are trying to grow our own marketing team at Pangolin. I see Ken is on the call. We're going to bring him on board, hopefully, to help out. But no, that's great insight. I appreciate that, Jay. And a couple more topics I want to cover today. So one is kind of just around Pangolin and your thoughts and involvement there. And then around Avalanche Rush, and its growth. So let's start with Pangolin. Can you tell us a bit about, I mean, you were around when Pangolin was created and formed. Tell us about that experience, Jay, and what that was like for you.
Pangolin was one of the most memorable experiences, actually, because I think it was so early that, at least in the Avalanche ecosystem, there weren't the amount of dApps that exist today, and it was also this period where if you had new layer ones, you really needed to figure out a way to have price discovery exist on chain. And what better to do that than an automated market maker, or a DEX, I guess, broadly speaking. And so when the Pangolin project was starting to come together, you had our developers helping out to make sure that we could deploy properly. We had our team on the marketing community side making sure that we had the best strategy going forward, because also from the Avalanche's perspective and AvaLabs perspective, of course, Pangolin could, at the time, it could really make or break Avalanche's future, especially at that critical early stage moment. And so it was all about how could we focus on community first development, or deployment, and just kind of future facing initiatives. How can we also convince other people who are within the DeFi sector, people that in the marketing context you would say bottom funnel? How can we get them to change their behaviors to want to use something like a Pangolin? And that's the key question that we had to ask ourselves many, many times over. And it's not just one answer; it's multiple answers, because the way you want to play that game is you want to have, let's say, like 5 to 10 answers to say to as solutions, and then you could likely expect that one or two of those answers will come together. So it's just kind of like hedging all of your options essentially. And so some of the questions that I'll overview for this conversation is, one was branding. What's the thing that matters most to people? So community led was a really sticky angle, and people really, really like that. Another one was just simply the avatar, the little cute pangolin that is kind of roaming around. There was this kind of sea of animals that started to get deployed from the AMM side all across different blockchains, but you didn't really have animals that were unique or ones that weren't commonly used. There were, like, I don't know, there were some cows. I think there was like a cat. There's all these like household animals, I guess. So it was all just about how do you stick out in potentially a sea of sameness, and that was one angle, branding. Another one was making sure that the community was really well aware of what was going on. And then I think the last portion was honestly where you guys come into play, is how do we move this on towards actually fulfilling the community promises that we had said on in the early innings of Pangolin's life cycle. And so I think the coolest part was really to see the governance proposals pop up on the forum and having those actually kick in, and then effectively have a smart contract govern and lead a team effectively. And that to me was really cool to see. And those are kind of the key elements in the early innings of Pangolin, I would say.
Wow, that's an awesome story to hear, and it's great that we have you on the call because of your direct involvement with all the branding and marketing and promotion of the project. The two thoughts I had listening to your explanation were just the naming of Pangolin. Ever since I started working, me and Justin, people would ask, like, why Pangolin? And we never knew until we asked you about the origins. And we actually were on an interview with Saffron Finance yesterday, and they asked, and we finally had an answer. Like, it was Jay's brainchild. And then the second thought I had is just the whole transitioning from AvaLabs to community run. I think that vision and that process went really well. I'm not sure of a lot of other projects of this scale that have successfully been able to do a transition like that. So, kudos to everyone involved transitioning that. What about you, Justin? What are your thoughts from like the early days and during that transition period?
Yeah, for me, the early days were quite very interesting. I mean, so obviously Pangolin launched in, I think it was about February 9th, depending on where you were in the world. And just seeing that DeFi was, yeah, like what always impressed me and what I was so enamored by was the fact that Avalanche could get DeFi and they could get a protocol working in February when you think of, I mean, how young the network was. So, when I discovered Avalanche, there was obviously Polkadot, I mean, there still is Polkadot, there's Kusama, there's Cardano, and there's all these chains, and, they're always promising these big things, and Avalanche was actually doing them in record time. So that while there were some bumps in the road, that always stood out to me as like, okay, these guys actually do deliver. There is real use case here. There's actually going to be a community that's going to come here and just explore this ecosystem. And then to see that develop, I spoke to Connor a lot in the early days. I still speak to Connor, obviously. But just seeing, like how people deal with that transition was very interesting to me, how people get used to it. Also, it was a different use case, or different crowd. Like with this use case, or different crowd. Like with Ethereum, a lot of people were already DeFi degens, or they're already native to the ecosystem. So they'd had like a year or so experience of using these protocols. But as these protocols started popping up on Avalanche, you really found that like a lot of the community weren't necessarily from Ethereum, but there were people that were exploring DeFi as a whole in a new way. And that was very interesting to see that kind of fresh perspective on things.
Definitely. I also felt like when I came to Avalanche, it just felt like a fresh start, like an entirely new DeFi community with endless possibilities. And so, a follow-up question about Pangolin J. It's kind of just the present state of the ecosystem and Pangolin's role. How do you see Pangolin fitting into the current DeFi ecosystem on Avalanche?
I think it was the first one part of it is the first comment I said about price discovery. I think it is very essential for any AMM for that matter to have to basically facilitate that. But I think Pangolin's clear role is first being first mover in this ecosystem, first mover, but also one that has been able to stay competitive in the top ranks of the Avalanche DeFi ecosystem. That's also super important, just for longevity, and hopefully in the future consistently staying on in that top ranks. As I think it's the chicken or the egg problem that we're all aware of. It's like, well, we want more traders want more liquidity, or users want more liquidity, but in order to get there, you also need to have the users and traders. So I think really just riding on that momentum is key there. And then I think the second piece is really some of the other things that you guys have been pushing. I've seen some previews for I think there was like a invoicing or freelancing type angle, it seemed. I think there was like a profile page. I honestly can't remember what it was doing exactly, but point is really trying to add robustness to the product experience. AMMs is an innovation itself, but not necessarily an innovation comparatively to the other ones in the crypto space as a whole. But as you continue to have this base layer of liquidity, you can do so many things with it. So really choosing the right things that mean something to the end user, or that is usable for that end person. And I think the parallel I like to draw, and I don't necessarily praise these guys often, but Binance's strategy is really a strong one that has played out pretty nicely, where they clearly went to the centralized exchange model. That was the easiest way to quickly bootstrap liquidity. Then they started to go out towards DEXs. They went to layer ones. They also have a bunch of other products in between, and so they're basically horizontally scaling and using the centralized exchange as the launch pad to also then accelerate the growth of their future-facing products. You're seeing the same thing done with FTX and other exchanges. It's not really something that's terribly unique, but one thing that I think the decentralized exchanges and the AMMs can learn from is exactly that strategy. Not like diverting course and losing focus, because once you start losing focus, that's when it's a little bit tricky to deliver at a high standard.
Okay, great. So yeah, my takeaway from that is kind of just as an AMM, there's only so much you can do on the AMM side, but if you horizontally scale, that's where kind of the growth comes in exponentially.
Yeah, I think so. At least, or maybe it's like you can try different things that can tack onto the core offering, and then you might not hit on the first two ideas, but at least that's a reasonable direction to go. And I think that's what's going to start separating AMMs from other AMMs. SushiSwap is actually a really good example. They're doing that right now. You guys are doing that right now as well. It's just a matter of then finding your footing, and then once you find that footing, then start going vertically again, seeing if you can scale that way.
That's an awesome strategy. I think that definitely aligns with what we think will be successful. Justin, do you want to add some commentary onto the horizontal scaling?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly spot on. Horizontal scaling is so key. Leo obviously does a great job at this, and I'm always so impressed by his work ethic and how he manages to bring people in. And I can never find the words to say how impressed I am by him. But yeah, it's definitely part of our strategy. So the thing is, you got to think of the broader ecosystem. You got to then bring in all of these players, and then you create these network effects. And a lot of that is UX. In DeFi space, Web 2 has matured quite a lot in terms of the experience they provide to users. Whereas Web 3, because of just due to its nature, it still hasn't provided that experience where people go, oh, it's seamless. It's still pretty confusing. You listen to Jay's story about his friend that spent $1,000 on Ethereum. a good user experience would have prevented that because they would have made an early warning system to prevent that user from going through that, what is a pretty bad experience, to be fair. So yeah, there's horizontal scaling, innovation. For me, the thing is, this space, like there's an Elon Musk where like quotes, I can't remember the exact one, but like he's talking about like why do they open source their technology? And he's like, well, who cares if people steal it? Ultimately, if we can't be innovative enough and if we can't build the best stuff, well, then we don't deserve to be the market leader. And that's kind of where I feel, right? You have to be the most innovative. Sometimes that can be challenging because true innovation doesn't take a week of dev work, which some people in the industry feel it does. But yeah, I definitely agree. You got to build cool stuff and bring as many people together as possible.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Justin. And we definitely have so many cool things that we want to build at Pangolin. And there's so many projects around, new projects, existing projects coming from different networks, making Avalanche DeFi and the ecosystem fantastic. And I think that's a good transition into the topic I wanted to talk about the most with Jay. It's just Avalanche Rush. How crazy has it been this past month, these past couple of months with the new bridge, the Rush program, network upgrades? Just walk us through your experience with that, Jay.
Yeah, definitely. I think the last few months. So Rush, just to quickly share the timelines here with the group. Rush has been something that's in play at least strategically and as an idea since maybe like May or April. And if you guys know me in terms of how I like to lead marketing strategy, I pretty much don't talk about anything that's not public, if at all possible. Contrary to some people, I think in the crypto space, which I don't think there's a better or worse, but I just tend to like to lead in that way. It makes for a better punch once it's out. And that's what you saw in the end of August. That's when we said, okay, I think we have everything in line. We still have to get these applications to focus on the deployments, especially if they're not on Avalanche. Also, the incentive deployments and just everything else that might come up in the meantime. That's what kind of created a bit of complexity. So huge props to all teams within AvaLabs and also the protocols that had teams around them to make this happen as well. And the way we really started to look at this was we needed to figure out a way, again, to change people's behaviors or at least shift behaviors. You had a lot of people using ETH because it was the first mover. It also has a very robust community. You then also have a lot of these other blockchains, especially layer ones with smart contracts that had been in the space years before Avalanche, or even just a few months. But regardless, they were deployed before we were, and that's where we were looking left and right and saying, all right, well, we're clearly not. Time is definitely not on our side, so we have to figure out a better way to come back to the strategic goal of changing people's behaviors here. And so, before getting into Rush, some other concepts and pieces that really help facilitate that behavioral change is just seamless UX, broadly speaking. And if you want to unpack that a little bit, you can look at the Avalanche Bridge, for example. We had the Avalanche Bridge, the first version, deploy in February. It was more of a time to market play and just to have a proof of concept. What we quickly learned was it's not advantageous to have smart contract calls both on the chain you're transferring from, Ethereum in this case, and then Avalanche. Because what ends up happening is if you have congestion on the ETH chain, you're still subject to those fees if you want to cross that bridge effectively. I'm very, very oversimplifying it. But what that means is then you don't actually instill a behavioral change because the gas fees are still prohibitive. So it's not like coming to Avalanche is a good enough value proposition. So went back to the drawing board, deployed another bridge to completely eliminate those problems and also fine tune the UI interface. So then the UX can be streamlined as well. So we on the bridge, you can see the transactions pending, which is a great educational moment to teach people, hey, these are the amount of transaction confirmations that have to occur prior for your asset to start transferring across. And then on the flip side, once you're across, then also Avalanche needs to confirm those transactions to make sure that the assets that you sent are actually real assets that have been sent over. And so we took it both as a utility to cross over into either side of Avalanche or Ethereum, and then the second piece is an educational opportunity. And that really was the really strong catalyst for people to get super excited and emotional about the bridge. People who are on Twitter, they probably see the good bridging meme almost every day. That comes totally community driven, and that emotional excitement is really what perpetuated it to the heights that it has gotten to. I think on the flip side, in addition to bridges, liquidity is also a huge opportunity. And US liquidity until about a week ago with Coinbase listing wasn't terribly good, which made it really hard for people to get from fiat to crypto. And that was also a really big point of friction at the top of the funnel. And as you kept going down, you saw minor nicks that existed as points of friction, and we wanted to eliminate that or at least minimize that. And if it wasn't minimized at that moment in time, then making sure that it's in our product roadmap or our marketing roadmap or our business development roadmap to figure out how we could alleviate that. And then Q Rush, which is what you're talking about, Leo. Rush is where we then decided, okay, those functions I think have been smoothened out and we have the right rails in place. Let's just take the leap of faith here and see what happens. And once Rush was announced, not even deployed or anything, none of the incentives were deployed. Once it got announced, the total value locked on Avalanche's DeFi ecosystem went and 10x'd to I think like $2 or $3 billion, which is still lower than maybe like if you pick Ethereum, but at least that growth was a really positive signal for us. And now what we're focused on moving forward with Curve and Aave already deployed as of today and yesterday, we're very much trying to bolster the program. Maybe there are avenues that aren't necessarily incentivizing DeFi users like developers, for example. Maybe there's also another angle that we're not even thinking of that could really be part of this package deal. At the end of the day, we want to position Avalanche as a platform and a brand that is here to help people, just generally speaking. You're seeing that slowly creep into the real world with the activation like at Masari. For those that don't know, we got a branded ice cream truck that came to Masari mainnet and gave away free ice cream to anyone that came to the truck. As silly as that sounds on the top of line, what ended up resulting from that are people that just had a good time coming in, interacting with people, networking in front of the truck. You also then had every single person at the conference talk about Avalanche, not because it's the fastest smart contract in terms of time to finality, but because it was just a fun brand to be around. And so those emotional touch points are really important for when those customers and users make that decision to want to try Avalanche, because that's just another kind of checkbox, I guess, if you will, to add to their decision-making process. And then the second thing we're going to launch is for ETH Lisbon. I don't want to give too much away, but there is this very large activation that we're currently heads down on. And so if anyone's on Lisbon, feel free to DM. Would love to have you come through and see what we've made for the community and the city holistically, and really excited to share that once it's out.
Thanks for that, Jay. No, the whole growth of the network over the past few months since May, like you said, has been mind-blowing to me. I think there's like 500 billion TVL in the network now. Users have 10x, volume has 10x. Pangolin has grown tremendously. We've had to hire so many people to support the project now. And before I ask the follow-up question, Justin, do you want to just give your quick thoughts on how the growth has been?
Yeah, it's been crazy to be honest. I remember one week in particular, it was almost like someone had turned a light switch on from like relatively peace to just flat out chaos. And then like there was just this huge influx. Everything was happening. Everything was a million miles an hour. Um, yeah, I don't think I've ever experienced anything like that in any industry I've ever worked in, if I'm being perfectly honest. It was just like a pure whirlwind. Um, and that's kind of why I love DeFi. It's just like nothing. It's a lot of adrenaline a lot of the times. And AvaLabs are obviously key to that. Like the way that they planned it. Like I remember, for a long time, certain people had certain opinions. And it's because they didn't see what was happening in the background, and the kind of really focused methodical approach being taken. And then boom, all of a sudden it was just like it hit. It was pretty amazing to see, if I'm being perfectly honest.
Totally, I get that 0 to 100 feeling as well. Just 1 week it was old Avalanche, and the next week it was Avalanche Rush.
Yeah, that was a great
Uh,
time. Great switch.
yeah. So the follow up question is, Jay, like you guys have accomplished so much already. Like, what goals have you hit so far, and what goals are you still trying to reach, or new goals do you guys have?
Yeah, that's actually an interesting question. Maybe I'm not gonna go over all the goals that we hit, of course, but I think the main thing was really just getting the name on the map, beyond just conversations. We have incredible talent on the AvaLab side. We also have incredible talent in the Avalanche ecosystem side and all of the individual contributors as well. But I think the thing that made it really complex was we started running into this bull run that we're in, or multiple runs, whatever you want to call it. But the last year or so of just insane excitement that we hadn't seen really since 2017. You had NFTs, you had metaverses, you had DeFi, enterprises, everything in between. It seemed like every single possible type of innovation that leverages blockchain was starting to really take off. And so I think, as to kind of summarize, the goal there is really, or the goal that we achieved there is in the midst of all that craziness to come through and come as a blockchain that's, again, only a year old, a little over a year old. Was an incredible feeling if you really look at it in hindsight. Like in July 2020, a small subset of us at AvaLabs, we were celebrating the token sale in Goon's apartment in Brooklyn. So you can maybe imagine how far we've come from Goon's apartment to having a proper office space and actually having a team that spans the whole world. That's something that, again, to what Justin was saying, you don't really see that type of growth and that energy in any other industry, which is why I truly love being here. And then I think the second question you had, Leo, was about the future facing plans. I think the future facing plans, first and foremost, is to, again, continuation of the narrative of UX, maximize that experience. People should not have to deal with thinking about X to C to P chain, for those that know the Avalanche architecture. People shouldn't have to worry about all of these synthetic wrapped tokens and figuring out, okay, is like SBTC or WBTC, like, what's the difference? Well, there's no difference. So maybe there's a way to abstract that away for the common day-to-day user. And then I think the last piece is really infrastructure. It's actually fascinating that we've come so far with such crappy infrastructure, especially on the wallet front, but also doesn't just kind of exists across the board, that criticism. Not in necessarily a bad way, actually. I think it's just the fact that it's a hard problem to solve. But I think now that a lot of the teams in the space are equipped with the base level knowledge, we should feel empowered and actually almost feel challenged to want to go above and beyond to create these new systems that can work for people that are outside of this Twitter Spaces, for example. All of us, I think, we've probably spent hours on end troubleshooting, let's say, like a ledger malfunction. I'm sure people can empathize with that. I certainly have spent an exorbitant amount of time troubleshooting my ledger. Not that many people will be doing that. And so how can we get to that point where people can just come in and simply use the applications and products? That's, I think, the path that we need to be going towards as a collective group.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right that those are the goals that should be on the roadmap, and it's good to hear kind of just the experience of starting small with this idea of building a great layer one and then just getting to where you are today. I just want to say kudos to the long-term vision of the AvaLabs team. It doesn't feel like they're just trying to win today, right? It feels like they have a plan and they know where they want to be in a year, in 2 years, in 5 years. It's really awesome to see. Justin, do you want to add your thoughts too about the goals and the roadmap?
In terms of Avalanche or Pangolin, yeah?
Oh, just AvaLabs, Avalanche Network, all of that.
Yeah. I mean, I always get super excited about this, and sometimes I have to rein my inner excitement in. I just think EVM as a concept was incredibly smart from AvaLabs. AvaLabs knew that they needed an EVM compatible blockchain in order to gain traction. I think that's where, you look at Cardano, Polkadot, and Kusama, where they made quite a big misstep. And now they're trying to kind of like almost pigeon it in at a later stage. So I think AvaLabs made a very smart decision there. But that's for me almost like the SeaChain is super cool and I love it there, but it's like a showcase. So it's like, look at this cool technology, look how rad it is. It works, we can prove it works, we can prove, but like that's just the start. Like the use cases that subnets and a blockchain of blockchains creates are really immense. I mean, the thing is people currently only are really thinking about DeFi and Avalanche, right? But they haven't really started thinking about, okay, so obviously NFTs are coming and they're getting a really great bit of traction now. But you think about things like identity, you think about things like storage layers, you think about like all these extra building blocks that creates this like ecosystem of a real Web3. And Avalanche has that ability beyond anything I've seen to scale, right? Like if you think of a ceiling, if you want to build with like the tools that allow you no limits. And I don't think there's any blockchain with the subnets. Let's look at Polkadot. Why did Polkadot fall Kusama? Because they got a theoretical limit of 100 blockchains. Avalanche doesn't have that limit. And that for me is incredible.
Yeah, definitely. And Jay, do you share that sentiment that SeaChain is just one small piece of what Avalanche could be?
Yeah, I do actually. I see SeaChain as or the EVM, same thing at this point, but the EVM as the proof of concept, if you will, of Avalanche consensus being able to scale any VM. So you could effectively have any blockchain so long as it's written in a VM to then have that sit on top of Avalanche consensus and scale. And to Justin's point of the limits, we don't have that either on the Avalanche platform. And so you could really just horizontally scale as much as you want, and also have those blockchains basically benefit from a larger ecosystem. This also goes for the this also is the same for the enterprise deployments with more of the permission side of things with subnets. And so, by the way, the scaling comment also it works with subnets. But anyways, with the permission side of things, you can have enterprise deployments, and you can truly have a world where these enterprises can still hold on to their private information and only allow for certain participants to access them, while also benefiting from an open permissionless blockchain platform like the main or the primary network on Avalanche, the main blockchains that everyone on this call is probably interacting with today. And so that's where it'll be really interesting. Likely early next year, I think, is when subnets might be coming in, sometime in that time frame. Once that's out, really seeing what people do with it, because similar with any type of innovation in crypto, you don't really know what people are going to do with it until like 6 months later or a year later or even longer. And that's what really excites me most, because you just simply don't know what the future is. I mean, it also makes me a little bit uncomfortable, but that's probably why we're all here. So that kind of combination of being a little bit on the edge of your seat while also being really excited is kind of the crypto ethos, it seems.
Yeah, no, that's it's so exciting to think about how Avalanche is already so successful, so popular, but it's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of subnets. And so I just wanted to save a little bit of time for the audience to ask any questions they had. We booked an hour, so we have about 15 minutes left. Before we turn it over to questions, Justin and Jay, were there any topics or questions that you wanted to cover on this chat?
Nothing in particular, but happy to take questions.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. Let's take a few questions then. So if you have questions, if you're a listener, thanks for joining. We have on Justin and Leo from Pangolin, Jay, VP of Marketing at AvaLabs. If you have a question, hit the request speaker button, and we'll let you on to ask a question. Okay, maybe people just need a few minutes to gather the courage or think of a good question. But so Jay, I'm just curious, what's on the like immediate focus for you and your marketing team this month?
I think it's mostly, let's see. I mean, it's definitely Rush. Rush is a really big component of it. It's also just getting all of our core functions in order, at least on the marketing side. Again, it's all ladders up to the UX comment that I keep making on this call, really trying to minimize the points of friction, whether that's on the product side or if it's through educational material and content, then it's on the marketing side. And that's where I think it's going to be probably another, I want to say like 6 to 12 months worth of that work. But of course, you can't just always focus on kind of getting your ducks in a row and straightening out your core capabilities fully as much as we want to have that be the case. You also have to look out ahead and make sure that you're ahead of the competition and doing the right things. So it's juggling the home base activities, but also I think future facing. I'm trying to think of things I could say. There are enterprise deals that we're working on. There's some that have been completed. They just have a longer time to market. So that's kind of, we're at the whim of their schedule, unfortunately. They're not like crypto where they can deploy overnight and call it a day. Another thing is we have a lot more NFT conversations starting to come up in some projects already, almost close to or done with their products. It's just about a matter of deployment and bringing it into the world. Gaming, I think, is another category that's going to be pretty big on Avalanche. And then the last piece is then just continuing to push out the DeFi capabilities beyond the primitives that you're seeing through Rush, and seeing if there are other applications that want to benefit from those primitives that have deployed in the last few weeks. Ultimately, the tie-in for all of this is the experience will be fantastic for the end user because of low cost and near instant transaction finality. Those are two value propositions that I cannot stress enough to new users because of how incredible it is. And I think for crypto users, it makes sense, right? Everyone's used a congested network and almost kind of held their breath for their funds to go through or their transactions to go through. And that's just not an ideal experience. And so when seeing any of those verticals that I named, gaming, NFTs, DeFi, and et cetera, all those categories with an underlying engine like Avalanche Consensus, you're then going to potentially be able to attract more people who simply gave up in prior instances. And I think that's what's really exciting me most about the future stuff, and also is very much what we're focused on. So then people can actually use those applications and really see for themselves how amazing this technology is. And the last thing I'll say about this exact point is the analogy I like to bring in is it's kind of like the early internet days where you have these applications, you have these platforms start deploying on the actual internet, but you're never seeing people come up to, I guess, like non-technical individuals saying, hey, guess what? I'm super excited about this TCP/IP protocol. It's going to change the world. You really don't hear that happen. You might, some of the technical people might say that, but for the most part, most people aren't saying that. What people are saying is they're saying, there's actually this app that I'm thinking of that can bring you from point A to point B, and you can just call it on your phone. Maybe another example is you can order books online and it comes straight to your door. Like, these are the types of stories that resonate with the mass market, not the protocol level stories. So I think that's also what, from the marketing perspective, really trying to fine tune that messaging. What sticks and what doesn't. If it doesn't work, what sticks and what doesn't. If it doesn't work, let's just scrap it and not think about it until we come up to a new wave of people and try and just test and iterate. And hopefully that will lead to wider adoption broadly. And that's definitely what we're focused on.
Yeah, I love hearing your commentary on this, Jay, about how with the low transaction fees, the instant finality, it opens up a whole new world. An example is I liked that tweet you had about how swapping on Uniswap versus swapping on Pangolin. If you wanted to do the same swap, it's actually cheaper to come over to Pangolin, and potentially even quicker. Like, you might even be saving time depending on how slow Ethereum is at that time.
Yeah, and in that graphic too, I think you noticed this, but I highlighted that you go from Ethereum to Avalanche to Pangolin, and then you go back to Ethereum. And there was a comment on it. I didn't respond to it, but there was a comment on that post, and they were like, "I think your logic is flawed. You're not supposed to go back out to Ethereum." And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, no, I know that you're not supposed to go back. I mean, like from the AvaLabs perspective, we don't want you to go back out to Ethereum, right? But if you are trying to convey to someone to come try your thing out, you don't want to convey it as like, hey, come over, but you shouldn't leave. You should, and I think another angle is maybe highlight the absurdity of the comparison. Like you could actually do multiple trips back and forth and it still wouldn't be more expensive and it still would be faster. And so that's what usually you'll notice in, unfortunately, the 280 character word limit of Twitter. I don't get to express that as much in terms of like how I like to highlight the absurdity sometimes, but maybe over time people will kind of catch that.
Definitely, and I also want to touch on the importance and the impact of like big projects like Aave and Curve coming here. Now, that's already making a big splash, but some people might think, okay, Aave and Curve, they're already on Ethereum. What's the difference with coming to Avalanche? And I think they're missing the fact that they can innovate in different ways with these quicker transactions, with the lower fees, right? They can do things that maybe weren't economical previously to users. I mean, do you have any thoughts on that, Jay?
Yeah, the comparison I would draw is maybe to like, there's so many different comparisons, but one that stands out to me is maybe like the console wars in video games. You have PlayStation and Xbox, and they're pretty much to the untrained eye the same console, but there's some features that might effectively help or that might create a different experience. For example, the PlayStation controller is much more programmable than the Xbox controller. So you have this natural competition that has always existed since the advent of corporations that really allows for companies that can be environment agnostic, if you will, or in our context, chain agnostic, can flex on the strengths of certain product decisions that one ecosystem chooses over the other. And it's not really clear until you're like, a year or two or however long, like a fair amount of time past the implementation where you're realizing what's paying off and what's not. And so that's exactly it to what you said, Leo, is we want to see first and foremost Aave and Curve innovate from a technical perspective. But also, I think I wrote this thread about Trader Joe the other day. But one thing that I've observed in the last year or so, especially in crypto, is, and this was kind of inspired by the forks that happened over and over and over the last 3 or 4 years, is you can actually innovate beyond the technical component. You can innovate on every single layer that you can possibly imagine. I truly believe that. So what I mean by that is brand, community, team. You could also innovate on if you want to unpack brand for a second, the hero's journey within the brand construct. Like, let's pick Pangolin, for example. Pangolin, it's this cute little like animal. Maybe the story around the product is revolved around its trials and tribulations across DeFi and how it's trying to make sure that the world is a better place with borderless and permissionless technologies and DeFi primitives. Maybe that's one angle. Another angle is in the real world. Perhaps there are items that can be created like swag and things like that that can really connect those emotions. So ultimately, I'm not really a fan of calling a fork like a copycat anymore. I don't think I ever was, but I tend to find that people default back to that at times. I think that's a means to an end, and then the if they continue to do the same thing and not innovate on that, maybe you can fault the project or the team for that. But I tend to find that most projects will focus on how to differentiate themselves once they figure out, at least once they have their footing in an ecosystem.
Yeah, that's great, and I love the threads that you post on Twitter. They're just so insightful, and it's nice to get into the minds of people running, the Avalanche network. Um, and so we're almost out of time. Just want to be conscious of our 1 hour time slot. And so today we caught up on a lot of topics. We're talking to Jay about his background, how he got into his role, VP of marketing. We covered a bit of Pangolin, a bit of Avalanche Rush, and then kind of just DeFi in general. Justin and Jay, did you have any final thoughts you wanted to share with the group before we wrap up today?
Final thoughts. Let's see. I mean, I think I've been signing off with this on a lot of these types of podcasts and spaces and things like that. I think if there's any questions that you guys might have in general, feel free to DM me. I think I do try and answer, maybe not instantly, but I do answer all of them. I tend to find that I gain a lot from everyone's insights because I don't get to see them on a specific basis all the time. And so if there's pain points that you guys point out, that to me is an indicator that there might be something wrong with that experience. There also might be ideas that we haven't thought of that we can incorporate in our strategy. So it's truly this just trying to embrace the decentralized ethos and just the fact that we're able to have people from all over the world contribute and also participate in a conversation like the one that I'm in right now with Spaces. So DMs are open is I guess the takeaway.
Yeah, definitely. And I love how personable the Avalanche team is. You know, I see you, I see Luigi, I see John, Nahas, just in the random Telegram, DGen chats, talking to users, having fun. And that's really great that you're approachable in that way. And Justin, do you have any final thoughts for us before we wrap up?
No, same as Jay. My DM's are always open, and I always love hearing from the community. So yeah,
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Jay. This was a fantastic chat. Thank you to our listeners for tuning in. And we'll see you next time. Have a great day.
Awesome. Thanks everyone. Appreciate it. Have a good day.
cheers everyone.